Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about React's Use API, which is another one of React hook introduced in recently in the latest version, and currently I'm using React RC version, which is not released officially, so you guys can firstly switch to React19 RC version. Now I'm going to be explaining the working of Use API and how we generally use it in our code. So often, in our application we might have seen something like that. We fetch a listing from the server like with an API, and up till the time we are fetching, we kind of show a loader or loading state, and after the API response have been successfully fetched, we show the listing. So currently I have something like that, which is like some I have mocked a response from the server. So basically, let's say that I have to fetch a list of messages from server. So this is going to do that, and then I have another component, small component. What it does is basically, when we are fetching the messages, it will show a state like loading state, which it will show loading messages, and when the messages are successfully fetched, it will show us the list of messages back. So currently I have created some dummy messages. So what I'm doing is, when this component is rendered, when the parent component is rendered, I am calling this function fetch messages inside the use effect. So it will only going to run for the first time when the component loads. And what I'm doing is, I've created a messages state. I am setting the messages in that state, and then passing those messages down to message list component. And here I'm showing my loading state or the list of messages if they are available. So basically, if I refresh the page and load it for the first time, you guys saw that loading messages comes for literally 2 seconds, and after that this message state gets set, and we are able to see those messages on screen. Alright, so basically this is the traditional way of doing this, that we call an API inside use effect, and then we set the state, when we pass the state down. So this is what we used to do. But now if we have something like that, if we have a component which needs to fetch a list from the server, so then we do not need to take care of the loading states. We do not need to take care of when we want to call this function exactly to fetch the listing. So basically we do not need to worry anything about that with the Use API, which is newly introduced. So basically what I'm going to do is, I am going to import suspense from React. Alright, so what we need to do is, we need to wrap the component in which we need to show the listing or whatever the data we are fetching from the server. We have to wrap the component with suspense block. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to wrap it with suspense, and I'm going to pass the message list component inside it. Alright, that is the first thing to do. Secondly, I have to pass a fallback inside the suspense. So fallback means a loading state, which initially we need to show when the messages are not fetched. So basically the time when the messages are loading or getting fetched from the server, what we want to show on screen, so that is called the fallback. So basically I'm going to pass the fallback as a loading state. So this could be like a component, whole separate component as well, and we can write the JSX directly inside it as well. So basically what I'm going to do is, I'm going to grab this p tag, which is just the loading messages text. I'm going to cut it from here and paste it inside the fallback. Alright, so as my fallback, I want to show the loading state, loading messages text. So now when I pass the fallback inside the suspense, I do not need to take care of the fact that whether my API call is successful or not. This suspense block is automatically going to show the fallback up till the API call is not successful, or promise is not resolved, or whatever we can put it. So basically now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the state, because I don't need a state anymore, because I'm going to use the use API. And again, I do not need the use effect. I do not need to call this function by myself, so use API will do it itself. And third, I'm going to import the use API from React, and I'm going to remove the use state and use effect, because I'm not going to be needing these. Now again, I was setting the messages state. I do not need to do that. Alright, so basically what I'm going to do is now I have to pass this function, which is actually an async function, because it returns a promise. Now I have to pass this function down to the listing component, which is basically wrapped inside the suspense block. So I am not going to pass the messages, I am going to pass that promise. Okay, so it is like fetch messages, and I am going to pass as fetch messages, and I do not need to take care of the fact that whether I have messages or not, so I'm going to revert all of that. So basically what's going to happen is I'm directly going to return the messages, but now here I'm not getting messages, I'm getting a async function, which is fetch messages. Basically now I am going to declare a variable which is messages, and I'm going to use the use API, and inside that I'm going to pass the prop for the fetching messages that I got from parent, and I think that's about it. So now see what it does is it made this component, which is this message list component, an async component. So basically what this use API is going to do, whenever we use API inside any component, it is going to make the render of that component asynchronous. So basically this entire JSX is rendered, but up till the promise inside the use API is resolved, this JSX will not render. So it will be like an async render for this component. So that is the use of use API. It makes the render of a component async. So now what it's going to do is it's going to wait for this promise to get resolved, and we have to make sure that it returns the list of messages. And again, when this promise will be resolved, we are going to get the messages, and we are going to show the list of messages. Alright, so basically I just had to use this one line, that's it, and I do not need to take care of setting the state. I did not need to take care of the loading state, and all of that is just controlled with the use API. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to save this. Alright, let me save it, and you guys can see that it failed and we have an error. So why we are having this error is because this is an async function which returns the promise. So basically use API do not take a function as an argument, but it takes a promise as an argument. So basically it needs to be a promise, it doesn't need to be a function. So one way we can do is we can because since this function returned the promise, so what we can do, we can call it here only. I can actually pass down the function call instead of the function instance. So basically if I save it, it still doesn't show up because I am not returning this promise. Alright, so I need to return this promise. Alright, so let me save it, and you guys can see that again I did not need to take care of the loading state. It happened all by itself. It showed the fallback for first 2 seconds, and then it showed the messages. So basically now I have called this function here. It is going to return the promise. So basically what I'm doing is I'm passing the promise down instead of the function, and here I pass that promise inside the use, and now it's uses headache to resolve that promise and then return the messages and then show the list of messages. So it made our lives really simpler. So I think this is the newer way to fetch any data from the server and then show the loading state and then eventually show the data. We can also create it like a variable instead of function, which could be like equal to promise, and then we can pass that variable directly down. So instead of making a function and calling that function, we can do it either way. One more thing I want to mention is that we cannot just pass promises inside use API, we can also pass contexts inside use API. So that is another use case of use. So basically we can have a context. You guys are familiar with React Context API, so we can have a context and we can pass the context inside use API, and until the value from the context is fetched, we can show a fallback, and then we are going to, when the values are fetched or retrieved, so then it's going to show the listings of whatever the data which is retrieved. So that is like the second use case of it. So I hope you guys understood the concept of use API and how we use it generally. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please let me know in the comment section if anything else you want me to make the video on. Thanks.